Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. As I always say, everything I'm about to say is completely speculative based on very little information that the show provides us with. Let's watch.
들 위해 이제 쓰지 않고 자기는 이제 아이들 위해 다 희생을 자기는 이제 아이들 위해서 했는데 너는 뭐 희생 안 하고 그냥 나를 위해 나 자신을 위해 돈 쓰는 데만 이제 급급하다. 그냥 술 먹고 노는 데 막 쓰고.
그리고 또 방탕생활을 할 수도 있어 젊었을 때. 응? 원래 남자들은 한국 남자들은 그렇다 그래.
All right, interesting. I'm always glad to see the dynamic between the cast members and their parents because it might give us a glimpse into why some of these individuals have the schemas that they do, or the schemas that they seem to exhibit. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what we're seeing, and we're just seeing one interaction, but let's analyze what the mom is saying. So Deavan is saying, or Jihoon is saying, that Deavan is very disappointed in him, and Deavan and her mom are moving to a hotel, and Deavan might be leaving me, might divorcing me, and it's because I spent money going out. Now, he didn't tell Deavan that. What he said was he saved his money and he didn't spend it, but what now he is saying is he spent all his money frivolously going out with his friends. And the mom is saying, well, doesn't she understand that all Korean boys are like that? Or men are like that? So what does this tell us? Well, there's a lot of hypotheses. One is that she really wants Jihoon to move out and succeed in life. And maybe this is the first kind of argument that she could make against Deavan to convince her, through Jihoon, that would convince Deavan to stay in the marriage. So maybe she's just grasping at straws. Or this is some sexist notion that is in Korea that men do what they want and are irresponsible and they drink a lot or they waste their money, and that's just how Korean men are, and they have that prerogative, and that's just men, boys. Boys will be boys, and maybe that if that is a cultural message, let me know in the comments if you know. Or it's just a notion that the mom has that might have been pumped into Jihoon's mind throughout his entire life of like, well, yeah, men were irresponsible, so why try? Another possibility is that she has infantilized him through his entire life. I have no data on that, but dependent personality sometimes is the result of a parent, usually an anxious parent, who sees their children as way younger than they actually are for various reasons. Maybe traumas that the mom went through, maybe Jihoon had some academic issues, who knows. But the parents will see the child as way younger than they actually are. We couldn't think of Brandon's parents as possible candidates for that. We don't know, but we might speculate. And when you treat someone like they're younger, they tend to think of themselves as if they're younger and will act younger. Whereas when you treat them their age or a little bit older, they tend to act that way. So is what the mom just said an expression of that? It's like, well, you have always been irresponsible because that's who you are. And you've always needed me to take care of you because you're incompetent. And doesn't Deavan understand that? I don't know. I'm reading a lot into it, but let's watch. I hope we get a lot more data here.
원래 결혼하기 전에 이 거짓말도 하고 저 거짓말도 한다 그래. 그 여자가 좋으면은 선의의 거짓말 있지. 악에 있는 거짓말이 아니고 그냥 아니 여자도 저걸려면은 아빠도 엄청
상황이 좀 생각보다 심각.
Interesting. So she also said that if a guy likes a girl, then the guy is going to do a lot of white lies to get her. Depending on the white lie. I'm not a fan of that, as you know, if you listen to I've done deep dives on lying and truth, and I'm not a fan of lying, and I'm not a fan of spin, and I'm not a fan of being fake. I'm not a fan of that. I think if you need to lie to someone to get them to like you, then I don't know what to say. You're starting your relationship on a false premise. You are risking everything by lying. Why can't you just be yourself? And why can't that just have people like you? So maybe the mom has some odd moral compass that also has been absorbed by Jihoon. That certainly seems possible.
아니, 그러니까 내가 결국 그 거짓말을 한 거에 대해서 그게 이제 한꺼번에 확 밀려온 거지. 그동안 쌓였던 게 그냥.
근데 그거 준비가 다 안 돼 있다고 미국으로 떠난다고? 그래도 사랑을 하니까 같이 사는 거 아니냐. 그 순간 하기 싫어. 이게 내 안 맞아. 그 순간을 참아야 돼요.
So I think to the mom, she looks at their apartment that they moved into and says, yeah, not a great neighborhood, not a great place, but it'll work. But to Deavan and to Deavan's mom, the apartment is a lot below their standards, which is fine to have, but I always marvel at how surprised the Americans are when they go to other countries and they see that things are different. So the fact that that didn't occur to them, like, I wonder if things are different in Seoul than they are in the United States. I wonder if economics are different, or the expectation of how much square footage you have in a place, or the way bathrooms are situated. I wonder if different cultures have different ways of living that I will have to adjust to, or I need to ask myself if I want to adjust to that. This idea that Americans have sometimes of just like, well, surely the way I live right now will just be magically transported to these other countries, and I can just dress and act and do everything as I normally did in a completely different culture with a completely different history. Now, of course, Deavan has every reason to be upset because she was lied to, but the apartment that they live in does not surprise me, given what I understand what Korean apartments can look like, especially given both of their income level. So maybe the mom's coming from that. She's like, I don't understand. What's the big deal here? I understand they're a little disappointed in the apartment, but what did they expect? A mansion?
어떻게 단정을 짓고 무슨 떠난다는 말을 그렇게 쉽게 하냐? 응?
대본 입장에서 내가 하는 방식이 자기를 사랑하지 않는다고 생각을 했나 보지. 인생 좀 헛산 것 같아, 엄마.
So I will commend Jihoon for taking responsibility. He has every reason right now to, well, not every reason, but it'd be very common and typical for someone in his position to villainize Deavan, especially as his mom is villainizing Deavan a little bit. He, most people in this position would say, you're right. Deavan is a monster. She is uptight, and she is demanding, and she is too picky, and there is something wrong with her. Instead, he's like, Mom, I don't think you understand what I've done to her. I don't think you understand the lies that I've done and how it makes her feel, which I think is justifiable. And I have really screwed up there. And then he says, I've been living my life all wrong. And I suspect that this is him facing what he has not often faced, because he is avoiding all the time or procrastinating all the time, because he's running away from the anxiety of I am a failure. So this might be a moment of clarity for him to say, I need to not avoid. I need to actually try to succeed, build little successes, and learn that I can succeed, and then continue going down that road and eventually have a career and move your way up, that kind of thing. We'll see what he does.
I'm almost 30 years old. I have no money. I feel like a loser. 모르겠어, 나는. 그냥 나는 솔직히 난 대본한테 그냥
Yeah, I feel so bad for him. I feel so bad for him. And I hate to think that people watching this show would ridicule him. He has lied to Deavan, and he did terrible things along those lines. But underneath that is this, and I hope that people can see that this is what he is running from. This, I'm a failure. There's something deeply wrong with me. And, by the way, he could be depressed. We don't know anything. I mean, that's always this question mark, this huge question mark that I have. Most people will suffer from, or at least half, perhaps, but maybe more than half of people will suffer from some legitimate diagnosable disorder at some point in their life. So it wouldn't be surprising if some of the cast members suffered from, a significant anxiety disorder, significant mood disorder, significant personality disorder. And these disorders cause a lot of suffering if you've ever experienced them before or known someone. So is he depressed? Is he anxious? What's going on with him? And so all that behavior of avoidance and desperation and lying out of desperation and shooting himself in the foot, I think these are just symptoms of what's going on underneath, which is this. And I really feel terrible for him.
I have no money because I have a debt, $30,000. So I'm just borrow money from parents.
뭐 부모한테 하는 거? 네가 갚는다 그랬잖아.
Yeah, debt can be crushing to people. When people are in a lot of debt and they don't see any way out, it can be crushing. I had a similar moment to Jihoon when I was in a lot of debt after my master's degree. I racked up a lot of credit card debt in addition to my student loans, and because I wanted to go quickly through graduate school and I didn't want to work that much because I was working so hard in graduate school. And then I get my master's and I get my first job as a therapist, and it doesn't pay very much at all. In fact, I figured out that my paycheck from being a novice therapist, I was getting paid $2,000 a month. And in debt, I was in debt so much that $1,100, so more than half of my paycheck was going towards interest. Just the interest on the principal of my student loans and my credit card debt. So most of my money was just going towards interest. And then I just had $900 left to pay my bills, of which didn't really cover it all. I probably needed about $1,200 to survive. And so I was going into debt even more after graduation. And things were rough. And I remember just staring at my Excel spreadsheet, figuring out all of my finances and just thinking like, what's happening? Why did I make that choice? Why did I go into debt? Why didn't I work more when I was in graduate school? Why did I rack up credit card debt? And I was living like a college person. I didn't have an extravagant life, that's for sure. So I've been there. By the way, what helped me to pull out of that nosedive was I worked 70 hours a week. So I had my job as a therapist at an agency, which is a typical entry-level job. I got my internship hired me. And I had a private practice that I did in the evenings and the weekends. And I also started teaching at Antioch University as an adjunct, which doesn't pay very much. Being a professor is almost like a hobby. It doesn't pay that much, by the way. But being a therapist did pay quite a bit. And so I would work 4/10s at my agency job because I taught on Fridays. And then in the evenings, I would see clients on the weekends. And so I saw clients until midnight sometimes. Some clients would want to work with me and I'd be like, well, the only spot I have is an 11 p.m. spot. Is that okay with you? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I make a lot more money in private practice than I do at the agency. And so I worked 70 hours a week, 7 days a week, and I was exhausted all the time. I did this for years, and I paid off all the debt. And then I quit my agency job, and I just stayed as a professor and a private practice therapist, and I've been doing that for a long time. But I've been there before. Now, the difference is that my parents did not relationally traumatize me such that I believed I was a failure. And so although was very stressed out, I believed I could get myself out of it, even though I had really no evidence of that. And I was 26 years old and had never really done anything like that before. And as a 50-year-old person now, I think of 26-year-olds as basically children. And so I was pretty naive about a lot of things. But because my parents gave me a lot of experiences where I could make my own mistakes, where I could fall on my face and learn I could pick myself back up, where they would praise me for things that I did well, where they didn't overprotect me, where they didn't dominate my life and control me, I was able to figure things out on my own and learn repeatedly over thousands of little incidences that I can succeed if I try, if I apply myself, if I get a laser focus on something, I will succeed in all likelihood. And if I don't succeed, I'll figure out some other pathway in which I probably will succeed. Other people succeed I probably will too. I don't know how I'm going to do it, and I feel like a failure right now, but I believe in myself that I can do this. Jihoon, I don't think, has that because of the way he was raised. I'm having a hard time deciphering why the parents would create an environment like that for him because we're just not getting a lot of data. But I don't know, the parents seem okay, but that, as we just seeing the little bit of data we've seen thus far doesn't really tell us much. But anyway, I feel terrible for him. And yeah, debt can be very crushing for people, even when they believe that, even when they don't believe that they're a failure, So I feel really terrible for him. And we know that other people in this situation might contemplate drastic action against themselves because of that crushing demoralization that they're feeling. And by the way, if you ever feel that in any circumstance, find a therapist, talk with them. There's a way out of it, or find a support group or something. There's a way out of it, just like there is for Jihoon. There's a way out of it for him. The path is for him to express this to Deavan. I don't think Deavan knows this about him. If Deavan sees this, she would go, oh, well, at least he's taking it to heart. I think that's important. And then the two of them can sit down and say, what are we going to do? And he could go to therapy and learn how to believe in himself. And then it's all about little successes, baby steps of, okay, let's do 2 months of working where you budget and you succeed at your budget. And then maybe it's another 2 months of budgeting even better. Maybe it's trying to get that better job or looking for that other job, but it's baby steps. It's not shooting for the moon at the beginning because that usually doesn't work. But each step of the way, it's like, okay, maybe I can do this. That's one tick in the column of I am a success. I have a lot of data saying I'm a failure, but now I have a little bit on the other side of the scale saying I can succeed. And the more successes you have, then the more you believe you can succeed, and the less likely you are to avoid situations in which that question mark can be asked of, are you a success or failure? So, and that's my hypothesis about him, is that because this is what's going on in him, he avoids the question of, am I a success or a failure, by avoiding careers, by avoiding budgeting, by avoiding talking about it or thinking about it. And therefore, he doesn't have to think about it. It's just because he believes that if he thinks about it, the answer is clear, I'm a failure. So he has two options: sitting in the fact that I'm a failure and I'm a loser like this, or avoid. Most people would avoid in a situation like that, like him.
울지 말고 얘기하라고. 남자 새끼가 무슨 우는 모습을 보이고 그래. 새끼 소리가 저절로 나오네.
Stop crying. A man shouldn't cry. That's rough. That's rough. A lot of people would be like that to people, and men in particular. We wonder why men are more violent. We wonder why men die earlier. We wonder why men don't ask for help. We wonder why men aren't vulnerable. It's because we tell men that they can't cry, and there's something wrong with them for crying. Jihoon, this is possibly the most healthy thing he can do in all the behavior we've seen, is just to sit and cry and express himself. And that's, it's good. There's a lot to cry about. So it's upsetting to watch his mom pile on and shame him. We're starting to see a little bit of that neglect or something, or disdain of, you're a loser. There's a little bit of that language in what she's saying. Stop crying. A man shouldn't cry. Essentially, I don't know if that's the message or if it's being received that way, but you're a loser. Now, could that contribute to dependent personality? Absolutely. To be treated like you're a loser, imagine he's 4 years old and he's crying, and the mom's like, stop crying, you're a loser, essentially is the message. Then you believe, I'm a loser, and I always fail because of who I am. I don't make mistakes, I am a mistake. That's what dependent people often believe.
우리 아들 우는 꼴 못 보지. 사람들은 인내가 또 끝내주잖아.
So that's a part of it is, and I don't know of this family, but the Korean people have been through a lot. In fact, my Japanese ancestors, invaded Korea and occupied it for many years and committed a lot of atrocities. So the Korean people have been through a lot. And when you put and by the way, one of I think my great-great-grandmother lived in Korea and Seoul, I believe, as in an occupying Japanese population, as a bookstore owner, like school books, and she lived in the bookstore. And we don't know what happened to her, but the suspicion is that when Korea gained independence from Japan and kicked Japan out, they either forced refugees or might have even killed the occupying Japanese population, including my great-great-grandmother. We don't know what happened, but anyway, you put a population through a lot, and typically what will happen to the population is they will gain this value of perseverance and of not being vulnerable, because there's no time to be vulnerable. When you're suffering from atrocities and genocide and war and oppression, massive amounts of oppression by an occupying force, then you don't have time to cry. You don't have time to ask for what you want. You only have time to survive. And that value gets passed down through the generations, even though the future generations don't need to have that value. The future generations can luxuriate in their emotions a little bit more and their vulnerability, but their parents won't have it because their parents either grew up during that time or had parents of their own who grew up during that time. So I wonder if that's where she said, Korean people, we persevere. And they have through a lot. And then she's saying he's a soft person. So I wonder if, and it's possible that the war atrocities causes the parents to tighten up their parenting and deny vulnerability for the sake of survival. And then that led to the parents treating him like he's a soft person or there's something wrong with him because he's exhibiting normal emotions. He believes he's a failure. And then we see everything that we're seeing. I don't know. I'm just grasping for any kind of hypothesis at this point. But I don't know. I just feel bad. It's wonderful to see someone on this show actually cry, particularly a man on this show in a situation like this, where it's just like, I'm just really sad and he's crying. It's great. And to have his mom say, stop crying. Korean people don't cry. Men shouldn't cry. He's a soft person. What's wrong with you? It's like, oh, God, rough.
눈치 보이고
아기 때문에 결혼이 서둘러졌다고 해도 그때부터 지금까지 모을 수 있었는데 그게 못 모은 게
아, 모았잖아. 네가 나 줬잖아, 돈.
그게 그래가지고 얼마 된다 그래.
So, again, hypothesis. The mom was raised by someone who didn't tolerate crying or emotions or vulnerability, and thus has very little empathy because she was never shown empathy, and so she had to turn off her emotions. A big part of empathy is when someone has an emotion, like when Jihoon is crying right here, I actually feel a slight urge to cry myself, and then I notice like, my heart breaks for him a little bit. And then I'm able to be in his shoes. I have a one toe in the water, if you will, of his emotion. And then I can empathize with him because I can sort of feel it. He provokes that feeling in me. My mirror neurons fire, and I imagine what it would be like to be in his shoes. And I feel the emotion, and then that's what empathy is, right? It's one main definition of empathy. But if at an early age you had parents who were survivors of war atrocities and learned to necessarily put aside their emotions, they raise her, or she was in that generation, then you turn off your emotions because they don't help you. You might literally die because of vulnerability to your emotions. And then when someone else has a feeling like crying, you actually don't feel the feeling in your soul, in your heart, because you've turned off all your feelings. And so it's harder to empathize in a situation like that.
더 친절하게 대해주고 더 잘해주고 그렇게 해야죠. 더. So I need to change this situation.
There's also something I should mention. I don't know about Korean culture, but I do know about Japanese culture. And I'm not that familiar. I mean, I'm fourth generation Japanese American, and so I'm pretty far removed from Japanese culture. But I feel like I know it enough to say that there is a practice that some people will engage in that is considered acceptable or even mandatory when you have made a mistake that you fall on your sword 1 billion times. That you just say, I'm a failure. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. 1,000 apologies. It's all my fault. Please forgive me. even though you're not entirely sure that you are to blame. It's almost like, in order for me to prove myself to you, I need to apologize, and say that I'm a loser. There's something wrong with me. The hope is that I will prove myself to you that I have 1,000 apologies and that you will forgive me based on that, and then we can move on with our lives. So it's like an exaggeration of apology, an exaggeration of self-shaming as a gesture, so the other person will say, "Oh, okay, you've flogged yourself enough, you've whipped yourself enough, I forgive you." So I don't know if Korean culture also has that. I don't know if Jihoon is doing that right now, or at least that's a part of it. I think my hypothesis about him is a worthy hypothesis to pursue if I was to work with him. But a smaller factor might be this cultural dynamic, this cultural practice of falling on your sword 1,000 times as a way of proving to the other person that you're truly sorry, so you can get the other person to like you again. All right, well, that does it for that episode. If you want to join us on our Discord or the fan page, Facebook fan page, or the Facebook official, or the Instagram, or the subreddit, you can use links below and join the conversation there. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.